Okay, now here is the general process, the roadmap. Okay, these are the steps that you're going to need to follow anytime you do a discounted cash flow model, right? So for any company, anytime you do it, even for the same company, uh, valuation is an iterative process. Iterative meaning we do it over and over and over again because evaluation is at a single point in time, right? So the day I finish my evaluation model, it's obsolete. Right? I have made a bunch of assumptions about how the company is going to behave, the decisions the management team is going to make, all of these things, right? So I might do a valuation model on the assumption that a company is going to release a new innovative product to try and generate excess return on invested capital. We know ROIC going up should raise NOPLAT, it should raise revenue, it should raise value. And so we've built this model using that prediction as our sort of central theme. The company is going to release a new product, that's going to increase revenue, it's going to increase cost, but ultimately it will increase our return. The company is going to drive value through increased return because of this. Here's how it's going to impact the company. Here's how it's going to impact, here's how its competitors might respond in the future, how those things will impact the company. So we build this sort of predicted future behavior model. And then once we're done, we estimate value based on all those cash flows, all those choices. And then as soon as we're done, we actually get to watch the company behave. Right? We actually get to see whether all of those predictions, all of those choices play out the way that we thought they would. And of course, unless you guys are some magical oracle, and certainly I'm not, all of our choices and assumptions are likely to be wrong. Right? In fact, it's better than likely that all of them are wrong than that any of them are right. Okay? And you'll hear me say it over and over again. And if you were in my intro class, you already heard me say this a lot. But when you make predictions about the future, you are always wrong. When you make assumptions, you are always wrong. You're always wrong. And even when you're right, you were just lucky. You were just still wrong, though. Just lucky wrong. Right? You weren't right. Okay? So we have to keep that in mind. Right? That's why valuation is an iterative process. We can make our valuation model of a company better by doing it again and observing how the actual company behavior differed from our expected behavior of the company. Management releases this new product. We predict all these things. We wait a year. We see what actually happens. The new product comes out. We see how close everything matched up to our predictions. Then we refine those predictions and we rerun the model and see what happens. Oh, it turned out it wasn't as popular a product as we thought it was going to be. Revenue didn't go up by as much. It didn't generate as much. It didn't raise return on invested capital as much as we thought. So the value that we predicted last year was too high. Now that we have this new information, we can see how the company is going to behave. We might try to make some new predictions about ways the company is going to adapt to the changes in their market, to the behavior that consumers exhibited towards the product, and we'll rerun our model. Try to make it more precise. Of course, this new model is going to be just as wrong as the old one. Maybe not just as wrong. With hope, it is a little more right. We have used our old knowledge, tried to refine our own predictive powers in a way that makes our model better. Okay, so iterative means we do this over and over again, and this is what a job of an analyst at a big bank is, right? They give an analyst a set of companies, an industry. They say do a valuation model on these companies every year, sometimes more than that, depending on the company, and then build your sort of base of knowledge on that, and help us predict the value of these companies. Okay, so these are the basic steps. Again, we're gonna, in lieu of trying to intersperse or like cut in video of me working examples or something like that, I'm just going to try to talk about how we do all these things without giving you mechanics or delving too deep in the mechanics. And then I'll post alongside it, I'll post a video where we actually do one. Okay. So the first step, and this is certainly one of the most important, is to try to analyze the historical performance of the firm. And this is because the only way we can make any judgments and any predictions about the future is if we understand the past. Okay? So the only way that we can draw a line from where the company is now to where we think it's going to be in the future is if we know what the line looks like in the past, right? If the company's revenues have been trending down and our prediction is that they're somehow going to start trending up, right? We then have to justify those predictions in a very strong and with a lot of evidence behind it, a strong way with a lot of evidence behind it. Otherwise, we're going to be questioned. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the last, say, 10 years of company financial documents and company behavior, how that compares with the company's competitors over the last 10 years, how the company has actually positioned itself in the market. Is it a market leader? Is it constantly releasing new products? Is it behaving in a certain way that is then going to be predictable in the future? Right? We need to look at the company's past behavior. That's the best way to judge its future behavior. So this is a really time-consuming part. This part is going and taking down all the financial documents, all the 10Ks for the company. We're trying to pull all the data, relevant data that we can out of the company, and then we're trying to organize it into a spreadsheet that's usable. And we're not only doing it for the company itself, we're doing it for its competitors, because the only way to judge whether a company is behaving correctly is to look at the people that it's, look at the firms that it's operating that operate in the same market as it, right? So in this example, we'll be talking about UPS and FedEx. The only way to judge UPS is to look at it against a marker, a measure, right, a ruler. And the best ruler is FedEx, because these are companies that are doing the same thing. Right? If we could get the data for the Postal Service, we would include something like that, right? So we need a benchmark, and the best benchmark is the competitors of the firm, the peers of the firm. Okay? So analyzing historical performance more or less takes the most time, because the financial documents are long, they're dense, they're full of legalese. You are just reading hundreds of pages, trying to go through the footnotes, because you're going to look at, they present a balance sheet, there'll be 15 footnotes in the balance sheet. You have to go find each of these footnotes, try to parse out all the information. They'll usually take you to another table that has footnotes. You might be 3 or 4 tables deep just to get a couple of valuable pieces of financial data to plug back into your what we call consolidated financial statements. Okay, so we are going to build the consolidated financial statements for the firm and its competitors. Then step 2 is we reorganize the consolidated financial statements, and we use those reorganized financial statements to forecast the future of the company. Okay? So we say, okay, over the last 10 years, revenue has grown at 2% per year. So our forecast is that for the next 10 years, revenue is also going to grow at 2% per year. Right? That's how we use our analysis of the past to guide our forecast of the future. And again, we know it's wrong. So we're going to talk about the mechanics here, but there are some mechanics in forecasting. That's what the chapter immediately after the first exam is going to be all about, forecasting. So we'll talk way more detail about that later on. This is, it's not a particularly hard part of the process, but it is a very central part of the process. Any choices we make in the forecasting of the model are going to have a huge impact on our ultimate results. Finally, in step 3, after we have forecasted all our financial statements, we are going to establish a continuing value, right? So we don't forecast forever, because of course we can't forecast forever. So we're only going to do explicit forecasts for say 10 to 15 years. So I'll try to make an explicit forecast for revenue over the next 15 years, but I can't do that forever. And if I'm assuming that the company goes on forever, just in as a part of the model, then at some point I have to stop. And at the point where I stop, this is what we call the continuing value. The point where I stop, we bring in the key value driver model. We assume that cash flows will stay the same forever, and we estimate the continuing value of the firm after our forecast period. Okay? So again, we'll spend a lot of time talking about what this step looks like and how much it affects our model, and but it is a necessity. We can't get around ultimately stopping our forecast at some point and using this continuing value method as a way to get the whole value of the firm. Okay? Then the rest of the steps are about, well, step 4 is compute the cost of capital. So this is where we calculate the weighted average cost of capital. The discount, the weighted average, the WACC is how we discount the future free cash flows back to the present, right? So remember, when we say take the present value of future free cash flows, another way to say that is discount the future free cash flows back to the present. And the rate that we discount those future free cash flows at is the cost of capital, and the cost of capital is the WACC for the firm. So we'll go into a lot of detail here about how to actually calculate the WACC using real numbers, real data, right? So maybe something that you haven't done before. Then once we have that, we will calculate what's called the enterprise value of the firm. And this is our answer, so to speak. This is the total value of all the firm's operations. What is it worth? And then at that point, we are going to try to check our work by converting enterprise value into equity value by valuing debt and equity. Remember, the free cash flow model says that the enterprise value of the firm needs to be divided into the value of the company's debt and the value of the company's equity, because that's where it came from. So we will check our work by making sure that that thing is true. And then in step 6, once we're done with all that, we will try to interpret our results. And again, we're going to try to check our work. And this might be just as important as step 1, because this is where we make sure that we haven't made any mistakes, our model is technically robust and correct, our assumptions make some kind of realistic economic sense, our results are plausible. We'll compare it to, say, the market value of the firm and see how all that turns out. And we'll use this to guide ourselves on our next round of doing the valuation in the following period.